Okay, well, welcome everybody to today's NAFSA WIVRA webinar series. We are going to be talking today about best practices for international internships from both the university and provider perspectives. WIVRA, the Work Intern, Volunteer, and Research Abroad Subcommittee, is putting forth this webinar as a resource to the community, and we're really excited that you're all here. We've got a really big group. We're looking at 55 and counting on the webinar, so thank you for everyone who's here. Good news for your colleagues that could not attend. We are recording this webinar, and it will be available up on YouTube tomorrow, but we will get underway here, and we'll start with some quick introductions, and I will let my colleague Jennifer Baird kick things off.
All right, so I'm going to turn it over to video real quick just so you can see who is talking to you. So hi, I'm Jennifer Baird. I'm from Georgia Tech. I'm the director of the Global Internship Program, and I also oversee another curricular program called the International Plan. I'm a member of NAFSA's WIVRA subcommittee. I'm also part of NAFSA's Trainer Corps. I hope to see a lot of you at NAFSA next month. I've been in the field for about 10 years, and during that time I've gotten to work with a lot of different aspects of education abroad, exchange programs, curriculum integration, and now most recently international internships. My interests really focus on global programs for STEM students and also intercultural communication. I try to integrate intercultural communication and intercultural competency to our programs to the extent possible.
Great, thanks Jennifer, and hi everybody. My name is Alex Paisner. I am the Director of Enrollment at Global Experiences. We are an international internship provider. I am a co-chair of the NAFSA Tech, the Technology MIG, Member Interest Group, and I've been at Global Experiences for the last 7 years, working specifically in international internship programming and work with a lot of our various university partners out there. But yeah, we're really excited that you guys are joining us here. And for today's agenda, just to show you guys a little bit, we're going to be reviewing some of the resources available for universities and institutions that already exist that have a ton of best practices about international internships programming. We will touch a little bit upon the other aspects of WIVRA being the volunteer abroad and research and work. But because Georgia Tech's in-house model related to international co-ops and Global Experiences happens to be more focused on internships as well, we are going to be discussing mostly about international programming, whether it makes sense at your institution to bulk up on an in-house model, or whether relying on outsourced or third-party providers makes sense. And so we're really going to lead things off. We'll take myself off of the webcam. We'll start with the in-house models, and Jennifer is going to tell you guys a little bit about some of the key things to consider as you are weighing expanding the prospect of international internship programming. So take it away, Jennifer.
Sure. And actually, do you think we could do the polls before we...
Oh yeah, you know what? That's a very good call. So actually, we want to know who you guys are. So super quick, you should be able to see a quick poll pop up on your GoToWebinar. So if you wouldn't mind, tell us who you are. I know that we have folks from career services, study abroad. We might have some faculties and some other providers on here. So give you a couple more seconds to put in your answer here. Just so we can get a decent vibe on who we're talking to, and we'll tailor this conversation a little bit more specifically to the folks on the webinar here. Perfect. All right. So it looks like almost everybody has voted. We've got 83%, 84%. Perfect. Okay, cool. So it looks like we have about 52% of you guys are within study abroad. 25% is in career services. We've got 11% provider, 11% faculty, and a few others. If you wouldn't mind typing into the chat box, would be curious to hear for those who selected other, where you are coming from, what you're looking for on this particular webinar. Just will be interesting for us to hear. But definitely a good, clear breakdown of who we have on the webinar here, and I think one of the reasons that there is a lot of interest in this particular topic is because obviously internships abroad in many institutions can be under career services. In many it is study abroad, some it's both, others it is neither. And so learning how each institution manages these opportunities and the different models to be able to make them more available to students, obviously key here. Great, and just
do you want to do the next one too?
Yeah, absolutely, and just so you guys can see the other folks that are on the webinar here, Internships and Research Office, we have some people from risk management, experiential learning, so co-ops more specifically, and internship coordinators specifically for international internships, which is great. Cool, and so the second poll, we'll see if we can do that here. Sorry, let's see, close. And we want to get a good sense of how you guys manage your international internship programs currently. So just sent another poll your way. Want to get a decent vibe on why people are here and what they're really hoping to learn on this webinar. Okay, so it looks like we have a lot of people who are looking to get organized and explore international internships for their students, and a whole bunch of others have established third-party programs, and obviously I'm sure looking to get a little bit more information as well. 8% run their own in-house programs, which is great, and Jennifer is going to talk about managing in-house programs and how to scale them and some of the best practices as well. Other people typing into the questions box. Looks like people in various stages, both in-house management and third-party, but also getting a little bit more from the international affairs side of things. Okay, fantastic. This is it's an interesting group and people all over the map, so I think a lot of this is going to be pretty helpful. All right, so take it away, Jennifer, just to start from the beginning, those that are weighing programming and the best course of action.
Yeah, so we're going to delve right in. I can't see the presentation though. I don't know why it left my screen.
Sorry about that. Can everybody else see the screen okay?
I just see the poll.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. So we've just closed the polling, and hopefully you guys will be able to see the screen now. Perfect.
Great, thanks. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and delve right in, and I'm really glad to know sort of who our audience is, because as Alex said, I think that will really help us determine how to cater the information that we're giving you, and it's also good for me to know because, as Alex said, I mean, at Georgia Tech, we do have a pretty well-developed in-house program that I know is not really, the reality for most institutions to have something quite to the extent that we do, but there's a lot of best practices I think that you can take away, even if you're going to sort of have a combination of working with third-party providers and doing some of it yourself. And so some of the main factors that you even want to start to consider if you're thinking about having your own in-house program or even having international internships available to your students in general are listed here. So first, what available resources and manpower do you have? And this may seem obvious, but there's even some more like fine-tuned things in there, such as, do you have appropriately trained staff? Because advising students for international internships is different than advising students for study abroad or for domestic internships and full-time jobs. So you have to have that right balance of the right staffing. You need buy-in from different campus constituents. You need to have the software to manage this type of program because it is a little different, again, than study abroad or even domestic internships. And then you have to have knowledge of global industry trends and business practices in different cultures. Then you want to think about, are we going to be centralized or decentralized? And so I think a lot of this would just depend, of course, on your overall campus culture and how siloed you are. Here at Tech, we are a centralized office, so we serve all students on campus, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a few slides. Maybe you just are going to serve one academic department. So I know some schools have in-house just for their business students or just for their engineering students or just for liberal arts. And so if you're going to have multiple of these offices going on at the same time, how are you going to coordinate with each other? Or is it going to be run out of your international office, out of your career office, etc.? So you really do have to think about who has the resources and what makes the most sense. And then the next two bullets, the conducive credit model and campus culture and policies regarding internships really go together. And so what this means is really what is the definition of an internship on your campus? Do you give academic credit for internships? Are internships required for certain majors? do you already have a culture of internships abroad? Can students only do those in the summer, or is it more flexible? So here at Tech, we have a co-op model, which basically means students can intern or co-op at any point during the academic year. So you have to kind of know what is already going on your campus about internships in general before you can start to apply that globally. And then the next two, engaged alumni and career services and level of industry collaboration, really have to do with how you're going to go about developing your opportunities. So this is where I actually myself spend a lot of my time is trying to develop the internship opportunities for students. So you have to know that you have people on your campus or even pre-existing industry connections that can help you connect with the companies who can hire your students. You really can't go at it alone. You have to have others who you can lean on and collaborate with. And the next is your financial aid policy and funding. So would financial aid be available to students who are interning? Is there other funding or scholarships available? Can you give travel stipends? Is the goal for the internship to even be paid, or are you okay with unpaid internships? So you have to figure all that out first. And then finally, what is your capacity to assume the risk management? So that's, again, a lot of what I do in my job as the director of the program is vetting employers, making sure we have the health and safety policies in place. And so, you know, a lot of that could be shared with a third-party provider if that's your model. But if you're doing it all in-house, you have to know that you have the campus resources to be able to fully assume the risk management. So we'll get into all of these as we go into the next few slides.
And with the next few slides, I mean, obviously there are a lot of questions and a lot of factors at play when deciding whether to, you know, begin an international internship program at your institution, or whether to, you know, partner with other established organizations to be able to help facilitate that. Luckily, and the purpose for this webinar is to really drive home the point that through NAFSA, the WIVRA subcommittee really has devoted a lot of time and attention and has been able to produce a lot of resources to help guide institutions through this process. And so while today we are going to highlight in particular some best practices for a few different models, both in-house and outsource, the thing that we really wanted to start with here are the tools available at your disposal to help you get on the right track to providing more international internship opportunities for your students. So WIVRA really has leaders on both the institutional and with third parties. The WIVA listserv is a fantastic a great resource for those who you know, have questions and are looking to get specifics from those experts. But some of the documents that WIVA has been able to produce over the years are really, really helpful tools and resources for the community to reference. And so the first one here, best practices for vetting third parties and developing programs for WIVA. This was published in 2013, spearheaded by Bill Nolting, who I believe is on the webinar, along with Debbie Donahue, Marty Tillman, and a few others. That document was expanded upon in the Developing International Internship Programs, published in 2014. If you guys want to take a quick snapshot of this slide, or, you know, we're going to spend a couple more minutes or a few more seconds on this so you can take down these URLs. Through the WIVRA website, there are lots of resources available for download. So you can see that third link there is specifically to the resource library on the NAFSA website that will have a number of these. One other one that I did want to highlight in particular, so WIVRA is putting the finishing touches on a newer document specifically vetting providers for students as a student resource, because I'm sure many of you have had students come into your offices and say, hey, I found this program and this provider, are they legitimate or not? How do I go about doing things? Of course, there are many new providers that pop up all the time, but WIVRA is working on a document to be able to give to students to allow students to ask the right questions for vetting these different providers out there. Indiana University specifically has been able to adapt some of those questions to a really focused 1.5, 2-page document that they give to their students that is a particularly good showcase of how you can take some of these best practices from WIVRA and be able to tailor them to your own institution. Of course, other great opportunities and resources are via the Internship Net listserv, which is focused more on domestic internships, but does have many people in the international internship sphere as well. And we've mentioned the WIVRA listserv as well. And super quickly, just this is a little bit of a snapshot on some of the meat within these documents. So the best practices for vetting third parties, you can see tackles everything from how to vet your providers. If you are developing internships in-house, some of the best practices for that, assessment, health and safety, and there are tools in there as well for things like evaluation forms for both the internship itself and also documents for employers that your institution might be working with. So highly, highly encourage you to review this particular document. And then the other one that was elaborated on a little bit more, here are a few more questions just taken from that are important questions to consider when debating and trying to figure out the best course of action for your particular institution. What's the purpose? Do you, as an institution, have those connections? What is the geographic areas that you should focus on? How do you target students for these programs? What kinds of students will be participating in international internships? So again, these guides can be pretty comprehensive and have quite a few resources for you to be able to work your way through. The mindset being you'll have a lot of knowledge and expertise from the experts within this field under your belt once you've made your way through. And so with those resources, having lots of those good questions to ask, we're going to spend the rest of this talking about some of the practical application, what these kinds of programs can actually look like from both in-house and also third-party providers. And this is a great resource or a great model that was developed by Bill Nulting, Debbie Donahue, again, Cheryl Matherly, and Marty Tillman in one of those documents that really runs the gambit between opportunities for international internships that are fairly low commitment on behalf of the institution, all the way to your very high commitment institutional resources, which are those fully run in-house programs. Obviously, Georgia Tech is towards the right-hand side of that, having developed their own employer relations and their own program completely, versus everything on the left, simply your general affiliate agreements and allowing third-party providers to attend study abroad fairs and the like. But Jennifer is going to talk a little bit more specifically about her in-house Georgia Tech model.
Sure. So I just wanted to start off by giving you an overview of our program, and then I'll go more in depth about some of the best practices that you can take away from certain of the themes that we've discussed already. So our program was officially created in 2005. We'd actually have had students interning abroad since the 80s, but it was only in 2005 that there was staff dedicated and a formal program created. We used to be housed in what was called the Division of Professional Practice, which was our co-ops office, but that got moved to the Office of International Education in 2014, and that's whenever I started working with the global internships. And that's been an interesting transition. I didn't work with the program when it was in the co-op office, but I'm very aware of the fact that the co-op office has very important resources and knowledge, some historical knowledge that I need to draw from, so I try to stay in close touch with them. So that's something, of course, that you want to think about in terms of where your program is even housed. So we have 2 full-time staff devoted to international internships. There's myself. So as the director, I mainly work with employer relations and the risk management side of it. And then we have the advisor who, well, it's obvious she's an advisor, so she counsels the students on finding the opportunities, prepping their resumes, helping them get ready for interviews, helping them through the registration process, marketing, recruiting, programming, etc. So we are centralized, so we serve all majors and all undergraduate and graduate students. On average, we have around 130 students every year. It varies, of course, who are interning abroad, and we have students going to over 30 countries every year. So it is very spread out, which can make it a little challenging, just to kind of keep tabs on what's going on. Our top locations, no surprise, being an engineering school, that we have a lot of students going to Germany. Also Japan, France, I mean, you can see some of our top countries there. We have mostly engineering and computer science students who are participating in our global internships, but we do have students from all the other colleges represented as well. So in our model, the students enroll in an international internship audit course, which means there's no tuition and there's no academic credit, but it does maintain their student status, and it actually shows on their transcript that they did an international internship. It just doesn't count towards their degree progress. And as we've been saying, so far this whole time, that most of the internships that our students are doing are direct placement, meaning that we are working directly with the employer to hire the student. We have a handful of students who do third-party programs, but I'll tell you sort of as we go along what the reasons are why we don't have more doing those. So you can go to the next slide. Okay, so what do we do between myself and the advisor? So we establish relationships with overseas employers and develop the internships. We help with recruiting and vetting on both sides. As I mentioned before, the advisor, she really counsels students on how to be competitive for these internships. So there's a lot of talk about networking, how to change your resume or your interviewing style to be appropriate for that particular culture that you're looking at. Again, we go through all the registration practicalities. We do some assistance with visas. We have our own pre-departure and reentry programming. We also partner with study abroad to some extent for some of those programs. We provide insurance, and we have a full emergency response plan, and we also do some assessment on the program. I'm only going to focus on some of these things in this webinar, but as you can see, I mean, we really are taking on a lot of the work that you would normally outsource to a third party if you didn't have the resources and the manpower to do all this yourself. So a lot of people ask me, okay, how do you develop these internships then for your student? Where do you even start? How do you get in touch with these overseas companies? So these are some of my best practices, and honestly, you can incorporate these even if even if you're not going to go the whole way and have a fully in-house program. I mean, you can still have relationships with some employers who kind of meet your campus needs for some of your academic programs. So the first thing I would say is it's like growing a garden, right? So you have to take the time to really plant your seeds, but you may not see your fruits of your labor for a while. So it's really about getting out on campus, talking to lots of people, faculty, people who work in development, your alumni association, advisory boards, presenting to advisory boards from the various academic departments. Also getting out into the community. We're lucky, we're in Atlanta, so we have a lot of globally oriented organizations and some consulates here in the community, but just really thinking, where can I go to spread my message? Because the more people that know that your school even has this program and that you're looking for these opportunities for your students, the more likely it is that someone may eventually pass on a lead to you. The next piece of advice is to recognize your strengths. So, if you're just starting from the beginning, you have to think, where am I most likely to find opportunities? So knowing what your strongest academic programs are, or even if you have a major that requires internships, you might want to start with those. Because in reality, your students are going to be competing, in some cases, with local students for those same internships or with other international students. So you really want to look at, what is our school best known for? What is our value add? What is this international employer going to gain by hiring a student from our university as opposed to a local university? Also, if you already have academic units who are sending their students to do domestic internships, you may want to leverage those relationships because that company is already familiar with students from particular majors or the overall quality of your university. So it makes it a little bit easier to get your foot in the door in the global context. Then that goes into developing a strategy that makes sense for you. So are you going to focus on certain locations or on certain industries? Because honestly, there are unlimited opportunities. So you have to focus and prioritize somehow. So, going back to my earlier point, you want to know what your strengths are, but also you need to look at how likely is it that a student could get a work visa? Or what are the corporate or economic trends in various countries that may make it more or less likely that a company would hire a foreign student? A big factor is what foreign languages are taught on your campus. So for instance, we don't teach Portuguese or Italian on our campus, and so pretty much, I mean, we sometimes have students going to those countries, but for the most part, we can't send students to do internships in those countries because they just don't have the language preparation. Again, what relationships already exist on your campus? And you may want to be creative because a lot of what I'm talking about are industry placements because that makes sense for engineering and computer science students, but you may want to consider research. So maybe you have science students who could find research abroad, and you could, in our model, we would still consider that an internship. Maybe your students would want to teach English abroad, or maybe you need to look at more like service learning or NGO type experiences. So you want to think about what really suits your students. Then you want to look at what's already happening on your campus. Who, meaning which companies or organizations, are already engaging with your faculty and students. And so for us, I know it's, we're in a unique position because we're a large research university with lots of industry connections. You kind of have to see how this fits in your own campus environment. But are there research collaborations? Development officers, honestly, are very helpful for us. So the ones who are already working with corporate relations, often they're able to refer people to my office. Again, companies who are recruiting for domestic positions, sometimes, not always, but sometimes it can put you in touch with their counterparts abroad. I know for some schools, alumni are huge. For us, that's not a main source of internships, but in some schools they have just different relationships with their alumni, and I know that can be very successful for some schools, and so on and so forth. Again, I already kind of mentioned this, but really getting out into the community. So are there multinational corporations in your state? Are there different chambers of commerce in your local community? So meaning, like we have the French American Chamber of Commerce and the German American Chamber of Commerce. So we really try to know them well. Consulates, different government agencies, just getting the word out again that you have this program and you want to make these relationships. People are sometimes, not always, but sometimes willing to help you make those connections. Of course, you want to leverage your overseas partnerships. So if you have exchange partners or maybe you have a branch campus abroad, often they have direct relationships with industry, so kind of tapping them to help you. It's really important. You can also go directly to the employer. I mean, cold calling is not always successful, but honestly, what I've found is sometimes companies don't really want to partner with you in sort of a more institutional sense, but they are willing to hire one student like as a one-off and then see how that goes, and then that can grow into something more. So maybe it's really just working with the student to say, hey, you can go onto the Microsoft careers website and find an opportunity abroad. There are plenty of employers that have these global career sites. Sometimes you need to coach the prospective employer through the process. So for instance, we were working with a French company recently who they've never hired foreign interns before. They have lots of French interns, but they were really having a hard time understanding how our degree structure correlated to the French degree structure, and that was going to directly impact how much the students got paid. So I had to kind of make a chart that compared the US and the Georgia Tech model to the French education system so they could understand how that fit in. And then you have to have a way of disseminating your information, marketing, recruiting, collecting applications, kind of spreading the word about the opportunities. So we actually use Simplicity. For those of you from the career services world, you probably know what Simplicity is. It's I think it's called a career services management tool. Because that way we're able to post jobs and collect applications through that. All right, and then another big thing, of course, is vetting the employers. Oh, and I should say that these photos that you see are all Georgia Tech students. These are some students I visited in Japan, actually, in February, who work for NTT, which is a large telecommunications company. So vetting employers. So you want to start with whether or not the employer meets your internal criteria. And by that I mean, what do you require of an internship and of an employer? So are they able to meet your minimum number of hours per week, or how many weeks you want the student to be working? Can they provide for the student a supervisor or a mentor? Can they pay, if you want paid internships, are they able to pay what you're expecting? Also, you want to see if the employer has hosted interns before, or if not, do they have the capacity to host an intern? Sometimes they don't, and you have to coach them through it, but you kind of have to just decide then, is this relationship worth the time that it will take to help this company. I mean, right now we're starting to work with some startups abroad because they have a great need for students with tech skills, and they don't really have the developed HR office, so I have to kind of help them understand what it means to host an intern. So for us, it's worth it. But if you're just starting, you probably only want to start with an employer who has already hosted foreign interns, because then they'll kind of know what's expected of them in that way. Obviously, you want to see if the types of projects that are available to interns match the types of students that you have and the types of projects you want them to work on, and what qualifications are they even looking for. Again, going back to what languages are taught on your campus, what majors are they recruiting. Maybe they only want a grad student, but you only want to send undergrads. You have to work out all of that. The background checks is actually really important, and it's funny that it's just one little bullet point because it could be an entire slide in itself. But there's a lot of ways that we go about sort of checking how legitimate an employer is. And I do want to say that oftentimes our opportunities come from companies that are already that already have a relationship with the institute. So there's kind of a familiarity there that's built in, and so we don't have to do as much checking as you would if you were just establishing a relationship, out of the blue, or if you just reached out to someone abroad, anything about them, then there's a lot you have to do. So it's things like just checking their website, seeing if they even exist on Google Maps. I had that happen once. I mean, this might sound silly, but I had a company that I had questions about, and I looked them up on Google Maps, and there was nothing to be found in the location where they said they were. So even things like that can be red flags. Always looking up the LinkedIn profiles of the people that you're communicating with, or trying to find anything about them online, negative news or positive news. Seeing if there's other stories out there about how other universities have partnered with this company. We also have access to something here called visual compliance. It's like a government database, so we can check to see if there's any red flags or like government embargoes against certain entities abroad, because we obviously want to make sure we're not dealing with a company who's on some kind of watch list. Then the other thing is, if we do have a company that approaches us just completely out of the blue, then we have a questionnaire that we ask them to fill out. And Alex made reference to a vetting document that's going to be coming out soon through NAFSA. So a lot of the same questions that appear on this vetting document that a student could ask of a third-party provider are the similar types of questions to what we would ask an employer who just approaches us out of the blue, just to learn a little bit more about them. Site visits are great, but obviously we can't visit everybody. So you do have to kind of just trust your gut and like going through all the background checks that I said, and talking to as many people as possible. Eventually you can visit some companies, but you just can't do it all as much as we'd like to. And then finally, we say that there's no guarantees on either side. And this is just kind of our MO. I think some schools do it differently, but we don't make the employer promise that they're going to hire a certain number of our students in any one cycle, nor do we promise that a certain number of students are going to apply for every position that they've posted. So what we do is we really facilitate the opportunity. We try to learn as much about the company and the opportunities as we can. We work with academic departments to recruit, but we really don't intervene a whole lot in the actual hiring process. Okay, and then once you've made these relationships, how do you maintain them? So one really important thing is to be upfront about expectations. If you are talking to a company and it just seems like it's just not compatible, then you just want to be honest, because you don't want to lead someone down a path and then end up getting 0 applications. And if that does happen, then you want to talk about, okay, maybe we need to tweak the requirements or the the types of projects that you're looking for. You also want to be clear what you are expecting of them, and if they can't meet that criteria, then you may have to terminate that relationship. Obviously, gathering feedback every semester from the students and the employers is really important. So we collect what we call work reports and supervisor evaluations after every internship. And then you have to, if any issues have arisen, you need to investigate whether that just happened to be a one-off problem or if this is a growing trend that you really need to pay attention to and address. Again, staying in communication, we for the companies that we partner with every semester, we do make suggestions on how we think they can be more successful in finding the right type of students to apply, or just changes they can make to their job announcements, things like that. Conducting the site visits when feasible. So for instance, I just got to go to Japan because that's our second largest destination for our students, and it was really great to actually meet these people in person. Not only just to have that personal connection, but also because they're just like us. We want to know that there's another person on the other side of that email who cares about what's going on, right? So I think for them, even getting to meet me made them feel more comfortable about collecting applications from our students. And I mean, it's not like I can really sway their hiring decisions, but I think it does play a part in how they sort of feel about working with you as a feeder school for their internship programs. And then I try to invite employers to engage with us. Now I know it can be expensive for them to actually come to campus, so to the extent possible, if you have career fairs or info sessions that they can be a part of, you want to include them, or even virtually. So this coming fall, we're going to host our first virtual career fair, which will be much more cost effective for everybody. So not just having them be getting a mention in your jobs board, but actually trying to connect the students with them face to face, I think is really important. And then making it a relationship. For me, the reciprocity piece is important because it can feel like you're just constantly asking, oh, do you have internships for our students? What did you think about our applicants? You want to think, how can I make this interesting and beneficial for them as well? So sometimes we connect employers with other offices on campus, like if they want to collaborate on a research project, or maybe they want to sponsor, and this is very engineering specific, but maybe they want to sponsor a capstone senior design project for engineering. We connect in that way. Maybe they want to hire for domestic or full-time jobs, so I help make the connection to the office that handles those. So really trying to make it a two-way relationship, I think, goes a long way to the longevity of that relationship.
That's fantastic. And Jennifer, we had an interesting question come through the questions box.
Sure.
Obviously, so far we're talking mainly about taking mostly American students and sending them abroad for internships. One question here was, what about international students that are here studying abroad on perhaps an F1 visa?
Meaning, can they also intern abroad?
I guess the question being whether interning abroad, study abroad while studying abroad in a sense, but also the prospect of international students doing domestic internships, perhaps a CPT or OPT, and whether you guys facilitate those kinds of things as well.
Okay, so yes, we have a very large number of international students on our campus. They do participate in the international internships, and actually the great thing about that is that it doesn't eat up their CPT or OPT if they intern abroad. And the way our model works is because they're still registered as a student while they're interning, there's no interruption for them in their their I-20s or anything like that. I am not trained on immigration matters, so I actually don't have to do with the CPT or OPT, but we do have people on our campus who help with that. And so we do have a large number of international students who do domestic internships as well. It just doesn't go through us.
Fantastic, thanks.
Okay, and then this is really my last point was about what we do for risk management and health and safety concerns. So going back to this idea of vetting, I mean, we want to vet the employers, but we also vet the students because we want to be sending our best students forward. So we actually make sure that the students are in good academic and disciplinary standing, that they have academic department approval to participate in these experiences. We also, I mean, we're lucky because we're in the same office that does study abroad, but if you're not in the international office, then I would strongly suggest that you consult with your education abroad office because they're usually the ones that have the most developed policies and procedures in terms of responding to emergencies abroad, getting insurance, things like that. You can usually piggyback off of them or copy their same procedures. So that's what we do. A big thing for us, and I think this is a conversation in general right now about how do you get students to report or register their travel, especially if they're not earning credit or they're not getting funding from you, what's in it for them to even report what they're doing. So what are your carrots and sticks? And so for us, a lot of times students who are doing international internships need some sort of documentation from the school to get their visa. And so we won't supply that documentation unless they register with our program. We also have a get out of housing for free slip. So if a student has to break their housing contract, we can supply this paperwork, but again, they can't get that unless they register. And some of the carrots are that students get the recognition on their transcripts that they did an international internship, and like I just mentioned, F1 students actually can maintain their their immigration status if they're registered in our program. So that's a huge carrot for those students. Then we have mandatory insurance. So it's the same insurance as all the study abroad students. So they're automatically enrolled and it's billed to their student account. So there's no question that these students have their insurance. If they don't pay it, the bursar comes after them. So then we have an online pre-departure orientation plus an in-person meeting. So the online one is absolutely required. They can't register without it. We would put a hold on their account if they didn't do it, because this covers all the really critical health and safety type information. And then the in-person meeting is strongly encouraged. We can't require it, but this is where we cover a lot of the intercultural communication and cultural adjustment material. We always collect the overseas contact information and like the parents or the emergency contact information too before the students go abroad, so we can get in touch with them if anything happens. We work very closely with our legal affairs office to draft the various forms that we use, our assumption of risk and release form, the various waivers. They're a huge resource to us. Export control is something that I'm not an expert in, but this does come up a lot of times with our graduate students who are doing research abroad. We have to make sure that they're not taking, proprietary information and sharing it with another entity. So all I really do in that is direct those students to our institutional resources about export control, but it's something that's really important for you to even know is a thing, and to make sure your students educate themselves about that. And then the last thing I was going to talk about are sort of your travel warning policy. Do you let students go to countries with travel warnings? For us, we don't, but we do have an appeals process if a student wants to try to go to a travel warning country, and then ultimately our provost will decide. And that kind of goes into the next point, which is about having these institutional committees. Because we can't make these policies and run these programs by ourselves, certainly when it comes to risk management and emergencies and dealing with crises. So we work with our Dean of Students, our Student Health Center, Legal Affairs, some of the Provost Cabinet, as we call it here, so the people that oversee undergraduate and graduate education, Institute Communications, even the chief of our campus police. We get input from all of them on how to deal with emergencies and crises abroad. And then I was just going to close it with, as I call them, opportunities and challenges associated with having your own in-house program. And so a big thing for us is by doing it ourselves, we have more control over where our students are going, who they're working with, if they're getting paid or not, when students are able to intern abroad. We can kind of control that. Also, having the direct relationships with the employers really expands our university's engagement with industry and helps spread our global reputation, which I think is really important for us in general. It's more cost-effective for students because in our model, because students are not earning credit, they are not eligible for financial aid. So it's really not feasible for them to go through a third party because there's all the fees associated with it. So that's kind of where we are, maybe different on your campus. And then finally, doing it in-house really facilitates integrating the overseas internships into our pre-existing study abroad programs and into our domestic co-op program. So a student could pair an internship with one of our exchange programs, or they could do an overseas internship as one of their 3 co-op terms if they're in the co-op program. And then obviously challenges are, it does take a lot of resources, unique skill sets. You really have to be able to be nimble between international education and the career services field. So that's been a learning journey for me. It is really time intensive per student, and we have a lot of students who are interested in the opportunities, but we just can't accommodate all of them, and it's just impossible. And that's where I think a provider could really be helpful, as I think Alex will talk about. Because we don't have a presence in every location where our students are going, this does mean that we are assuming a greater level of risk. And so you just have to know within your institution what is your institutional comfort level with not having a 24/7 presence on the ground. And then finally, students who are doing these programs have to be a lot more independent about getting their visas, finding their housing. You know, we don't provide any of, well, we do assist in some way with the visas, but in general, the students are very much on their own. So that's just kind of part of how we talk about the program is, you know, this is for the more independent and mature students. So again, you have to figure out if that will work for your campus population.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of factors at play here, and luckily Georgia Tech has a lot of particular advantages that you know, have been able to make this a pretty fantastic program for a lot of students over the years. I mean, over 16 years, how many has that been? Or I'm sorry, about 11 years. How many students have been able to participate?
It's been over, well, now I think we're over 1,400.
That's great. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, and so now we'll transition a little bit, and obviously Jennifer has been talking a lot more about that high commitment of institutional resources, so being able to administer all aspects of their internship program. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about for those who might not be in a position to you know, have those resources or have those capabilities, what your options are. You know, obviously the ideal for any student is to be able to you know, interview or find a reputable employer abroad, to be able to interview and to land a great opportunity, and then to have the university or institution provide that support to help them go. But of course that can be very, very difficult, and there are a lot of moving parts, and so that is why third parties you know, have arisen and can be a fantastic partner for institutions to help institutions accomplish their greater goals, both in terms of increasing the number of students that are able to go abroad, but also increasing employability of their student population. So a quick snapshot of Global Experiences in particular. We were founded in 2001. Our main focus is international internships and professional development programming. And so specifically, we operate in 10 cities around the world, 8 internationally, in order to really focus on being able to provide a really focused and direct internship experience, you know, rather than have a little bit everywhere. We really want to ensure that we have a wide diversity of different kinds of opportunities in each program location. We have 30 staff. We have about 16, 17 here in our office in Annapolis, Maryland, and then the rest of our staff are on the ground in location, being one advantage. Simply being able to have you know, committed full-time staff members on location for the risk management, for health and safety protocols, and all of that can be fairly advantageous. We send about 600 students per year for internships abroad, and our top career fields are less so in the more technical and engineering heavy, certainly more so in business and marketing, law, fashion, those kinds of placement areas, which can be a little bit more difficult to source. And I know, Jennifer, we talked about this a little bit, the advantage of engineering, while a competitive industry, certainly having more specific skill sets that the students might have acquired rather than some of the softer majors of the world, and facilitating the right things. And we have programs mainly during the summer, about 2 months in length, and then during the semester is between 12 and 15 weeks long. So when, you know, what a provider is able to do that, you know, campus may not necessarily have the infrastructure or the resources to be able to do, plain and simple, establishing those relationships. Jennifer mentioned it takes time. It is can require quite the commitment that can really become a full-time job to be able to source employers to do the vetting, to ensure that they're going to be providing practical educational hands-on experiences for students, to be able to rely on a partner who has been able to build up a diverse network of employers over, you know, 10 or 15 or 30 years certainly comes with advantages in the ability to have a very good understanding of those employers, and to be able to devote the time to each student to ensure the best matchmaking. Assisting campus is in promoting available opportunities. Oftentimes, study abroad is tasked with, you know, providing internship programs as well. I know most study abroad advisors are busy enough as it is with their own programs, let alone trying to incorporate new initiatives, and so being able to offload that to somebody else is certainly advantageous. Again, we focus really heavily on the enrollment criteria of the particular institution and making sure that that is integrated into our admissions and enrollment process, and really counseling students one-on-one to get under the skin, helping with networking and resume building, cover letters, to talk about SMART goals and develop those. Specifically, we use the Clifton StrengthsFinder assessment. I'm sure the folks in career services are nodding their heads. It's a fantastic tool by Gallup that we have all of our students take. The mindset being based on 40 years of workplace well-being research. If you have a good idea of your strengths, what are you naturally good at, the things that give you energy versus taking energy away, and you surround yourself in an internship or any job function that really caters to your strengths, you're going to be happier and you're going to be more successful. So we less see ourselves as an internship provider, more so a career development organization, and we find that international internships just happen to be a particularly good conduit with which to help students figure out what they want to do a little bit faster. Obviously, assistance with visas. When you're talking international visas, the folks in study abroad may have some expertise in that. The folks in career services, oftentimes not so much. And then, of course, pre-departure, re-entry programming, things like the insurance, and again, having that on the ground should something happen. Obviously, the events of Paris and Brussels, the last handful of months, certainly scary, and having a partner, and really this comes back to vetting third parties, ensuring that any provider that you work with has really robust health and safety protocols on the ground. We kind of say that without the health and safety, nothing else can occur. The education, the growth, the challenge, the development of the student, none of those things can occur unless health and safety are taken care of first. But then, of course, assessment of the experience, reflection opportunities, and then really helping the student reintegrate their experience when they do return. Another thing we kind of say is the experience is only as good as their ability to communicate it. So really coaching those students at the back end of their programs, having those reflection pieces to allow them to really leverage that international experience when they do return home. Of course, when you are doing your vetting and deciding which providers to potentially work with, the other question is, what do you need from an institutional standpoint? Jennifer talked a little bit about being able to add on an internship through maybe an existing study abroad program that's already being run through the institution. If you have a robust program in Florence and study abroad sends 50 students for a semester, deciding, well, okay, we already have our housing, maybe we just want some language training and an internship, and who is a provider that can provide us with that. But basically taking a look at all the different factors and saying, okay, what can we do in-house versus what do we need to outsource to another organization that has that expertise, and working in conjunction with that provider to really figure out, okay, our organization, our study abroad office already provides insurance, and we do orientation, and we do some robust pre-departure prep with the students. We need less of that. We need a little bit more on the simply on-ground programming. So really finding that right mix based on what your needs are. And then trying to figure out what model. There are a million different ways in which universities and institutions operate. A lot of different ways that institutions will categorize internships. Some will say a maximum of 3 credits for an internship. Other schools have an internship or co-op requirement, and students are expected to take an entire semester, or maybe even as much as 6 months collectively to gain work experience. And so really taking a look within your academic curriculum at your school, between your departments, to figure out where are there areas that will allow students to be able to go and have these experiences while still being able to maintain their full-time status, perhaps access their existing financial resources to help pay for the additional cost of packing up and moving to a foreign country. Here are a couple of examples that we have just to show and really demonstrate the diversity with which you can make international internship programs happen. Arizona State, for example, has a faculty-led 6-credit interdisciplinary course in Italy, where they have a ambitious faculty member. He's fantastic, and he wants to bring his group of students to Florence and Milan every summer. It is able to be marketed as an Arizona State program. Global Experiences just happens to be the back-end provider to facilitate the career development, the logistics on the ground, and the faculty member will go over for 2 weeks and teach a class for 3 credits. The students will then remain in Italy for another 6 weeks doing full-time professional level internships within their field. Collectively being able to work at a 6-credit model opens this up for students to tap into their financial aid or grants or scholarships to be able to participate in the program. One of the things that Jennifer mentioned was really leveraging the other resources within your institution. And whether you are developing an in-house model or you're outsourcing, it remains the same. You want to be able to find those people in your university who are going to be the champions for these kinds of experiences for students and give them the tools and the resources that they need to be able to make this their own and to really take ownership of it. Another example is during a semester, SUNY Potsdam specifically is part of the SUNY consortium. They have been able to work out through their credit models where students can go abroad for a semester. They can gain 12 credits through SUNY Potsdam, and it allows any student from a SUNY school to be able to enroll in this Potsdam program. So rather than it being relegated to a single campus, again with schools like Oswego or Geneseo not having to reinvent the wheel, are able to tap into and utilize the hard yards that have already been put in to develop programs by a fellow institution. Jennifer mentioned the additional model of an existing study abroad program with an additional internship component. Florida State does that in London, for example, where they send a huge cohort of students to London for traditional study abroad programs during the semester. They have the option of pursuing an additional internship while they are there. And then there's everything simply casual referrals, where it can be more financially attractive for an institution to be able to create a custom program model. Simply from the organizational standpoint, from a third-party provider, it costs money to have the infrastructure and the expertise and the one-on-one with the students. But if there are economies of scale, if a provider is able to partner with a school and a school wants to send more students on a particular program, of course, on the provider side, it's able to reduce the hard costs of facilitating a program on the ground. Things like housing, if it's needed, or insurance, or experiential events, things like of that nature, can be reduced. The cost can be reduced a little bit to open this up to even more students. But then, of course, the vetting host employers is also completely valid on the third-party provider side. And the WIVRA documents that we displayed at the beginning have some questions that you should be asking third-party providers if you are debating partnering with them. Of course, the necessity that the provider is doing their due diligence with their employer networks and really making sure that, again, these employers have been vetted. Jennifer mentioned that they try to do site visits with their employers on the ground whenever possible. That's something that we do 100% of our employers because we have that capability in the infrastructure to visit that employer in Milan and to make sure that it's going to be a really substantive environment with which the intern is going to be able to learn quite a bit. But of course, expectations management, a lot of this is very similar to Jennifer's slides because of course it is very similar in terms of vetting those host employers, making sure that they're going to provide a great environment. One of the advantages that a provider is going to bring to the table is with many providers, they have been around for a long time and track record is absolutely critical. There are, speaking from an older institution, an older third-party provider that's been around for 15, 16 years, we see many new web providers pop up with very nice websites that look pretty shiny and pretty flashy. And I'm sure a lot of folks in study abroad get emails from new providers that have great looking websites asking those critical questions of, Does this provider have the track record? Do they have connections? How do they do their vetting? What are their health and safety protocols looking like? All of those things are provided in the WIVRA documents, and they're all pretty critical questions to be asking. And then just this a little bit more in terms of working with employers. Providing the employer and the students with assignments, a specific training plan for some of the visas that are required to intern abroad in certain countries. Having certificates of sponsorship may be necessary. So working in conjunction with the home institution and the employer is necessary. A place like London will require quite a bit of documentation on specific training plans, ensuring that the individual functions and tasks of the internship are completely in line with what the student is studying. It can be pretty intensive and a very labor-intensive process for the student or the institution. If a third-party provider is in there and kind of has the expertise to be able to help facilitate those things, obviously it can usually save quite a few headaches. And then, of course, on the ground, the limitations of an in-house program. The ideal is to be able to have that level of support on the ground for students who are participating in a program or who are off doing their internship, having orientations for the students, providing the intern and the employer with manuals and best practices on. Sometimes, again, Jennifer mentioned that these employers this might be the first time that they're hosting an intern if you're trying to do it on your own. And then ensuring the student knows who their direct supervisor is, having the knowledge on how to facilitate discussions between a supervisor and the intern. If perhaps the intern is running into challenges or trying to figure out how to gain more responsibility within the internship. Obviously, being in a foreign country and for many students being in a professional atmosphere for the first time, an internship abroad is can be a very traumatic thing. And it can come with a lot of firsts and a lot of growing pains. So ensuring that there are people, either if you're doing it in-house, there with you, or if you're working with a provider, that there are resources and people there to help coach and mentor this student to really help them reflect on the challenges that they will face and that they will inevitably overcome while they're pursuing their internship abroad. And then, of course, health and safety, I kind of mentioned, can be absolutely critical. And so I don't want to get too much into this here, but you can kind of see just some of the many factors that are at play when you are looking to send students abroad, not just for an international experience, but of course the added layer of being in a professional workplace environment comes with it another kind of set of factors to consider. And so outsource models, just for comparison's sake, the biggest advantages, of course, being that outside expertise. Starting a program from scratch or really scaling up a program can be an incredibly labor-intensive process, and one that a lot of universities don't necessarily have with the resources or the expertise. So being able to rely on a trusted partner to be able to help with those things can be really invaluable. The institution doesn't have to provide as many resources or devote as much attention to being able to do these things. It does free up time for other projects and other initiatives. If a provider is able to do a lot of that coaching and pre-departure preparation of students, again, it allows the prospect of more students to be able to go abroad. Each person within study abroad or career services is able to help manage more students. It can be a lot easier for promotion and program management. A lot of the time, study abroad folks are, trying to find that right faculty member to lead a short-term program, or they're trying to get people enthused about this industry and about, being able to send more students abroad. Having a provider to help out with some of that and to kind of be the wind beneath their wings. Oftentimes for us, we're happy to be that behind-the-scenes player and, let a faculty member become that rock star and to look really good in front of their dean. Because, of course, it means that more students are able to go and have these experiences. Of course, the downsides, it can absolutely be more expensive. Obviously, Georgia Tech has the advantage of it is a non-credit experience, but for many institutions, internships have a particular number of credit hours associated with them. Of course, usually that is, paid to the institution. Or, the alternative is if a student participates in a study abroad program, those tuition dollars that are going to the university would be going, at least in part to a third-party provider for facilitating the program. Oftentimes there's the tug and pull of universities where, of course, they're eager to send more students abroad to be able to improve their international education numbers, but of course they're also concerned about revenues, and keeping that money in-house within the institution sometimes can be a tug and pull. Outsource can certainly surrender some of that control and may deviate from other in-house programs. So if you have your own study abroad programs that you facilitate, but you don't have the infrastructure for an intern abroad program, sometimes it is a matter of finding the right mix in terms of your processes and the best practices of the provider that you are working with for the internship program. Of course, vetting providers themselves and finding the right one and ensuring that it is as open and transparent a relationship as possible is pretty critical. It can be a very time-consuming process to make sure that you find the right partner, and you want to make sure that you're making the right decision there. And then, of course, working out curriculum models can also be a challenge, where because sometimes there is the additional cost when you add the international component compared to simply a local internship down the street. Trying to see and piecemeal together, if a student can reach their 6 credit threshold for summer, how they'll be able to utilize existing resources, whether there are outside grants or scholarships to be able to open this up to more students. Of course, those factors can be compounded during the semesters to really find that right mix between ensuring that the experiences and the programming is fitting in with the traditional curriculums of the student. They're able to graduate on time, but also allowing them, of course, to have a pretty unique and marketable experience to be able to put on their resume. And that's it here. So I know that we've had a whole bunch of questions rolling into the chat box, and so we'll devote the rest to running through these as quick as we can. So let's, if you can bear with me, we're going to just kind of run through them as quickly as we can here. Our first question is from Janin. It looks like her question is, how do we get added to the listserv? That's a fantastic question, Janin. What I might recommend, let me see, I'm not sure. The thing that I might recommend just simply for starters is to hop onto Google and to look up the name. Either it's Internship.net for your internships, domestic or otherwise. But then WIVRA is, I believe, administered by Bill Milting at the University of Michigan. So a quick Google search should give you the instructions on how to join the listserv for WIVRA. Let's see, we've got a good one from Martha. How often are you able to visit the employer's site, and are these at cost to the university or the employer? Great question, Martha. From the third-party perspective, we visit our employers fairly regularly. We do site visits in person with the student while they are there in their internships. Usually there's a midpoint check-in as a reflection piece, and we incorporate the Clifton Strengths Finder assessment. So rather than the conversation being, fairly rudimentary, are you liking your internship or are you learning things, it is a little bit more laser focused on how are you using your analytical strength in this particular placement, and how can you discuss with your supervisor to tap into your communication strength more, those kinds of things. Let's see, Jennifer, just on the in-house side of things, how often are you able to visit the employer site?
Not that often. So there's usually 2, maybe 3 site visits a year, and by that I mean you may go to, like I went to Japan in February, I'm going to Chile this summer because we have a few new opportunities as well as some existing ones, so that is at our expense, the university's expense. But I do want to say though that we do work, sometimes we have faculty, maybe they're abroad for a study abroad program and they're able to visit the employer, or other staff are traveling for different reasons. So if we can have someone else from the institute visit an employer because they're already traveling, then we'll try to partner with people that way too, because we just can't. We could be gone all year, and I would love that, but unfortunately I have to be here doing my job. So yeah, but we do try to partner with others on campus as much as possible to do that.
Absolutely. We've got a couple of good questions from Jody here. Have you partnered with universities abroad who monitor and facilitate the international internships? And the follow-up, and so incorporate the interns both into the social and educational community in the city where they are interning abroad. That's a great question, Jody. I know from the third-party standpoint, typically it's not necessary because most third-party providers will have staff solely devoted to vetting and establishing those employer relationships. I know that most, ours included, do facilitate some on-ground like culture and experiential education while the students are there. So not just are they commuting, and working a 9 to 5, but they might be meeting up with some local Irish students at Trinity College for a day or two, or they're facilitating a project with the local community, doing some volunteer work, those kinds of things, to get, of course, the professional experience abroad. But also we know that one of the other reasons that students go abroad is simply inherently to immerse themselves in that culture and gain the intangibles that go along with that. So certainly trying to get them off the beaten path a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, and for us, I would say that some of our exchange partners are able to assist. So let's say a student is doing an exchange in the fall semester. Sometimes university partners have their own career services offices or career fairs that our students can take advantage of, and so they may find an internship that way. And honestly, already being in the country is really helpful to the student, because then they can actually go for an in-person interview. And we actually have some employers, particularly in Germany, who tell us that they only want to hire the students who will already be in the country, because for them, having the association with the local university, knowing that they've been there, taking classes in a local language, learning the culture, etc., makes them a lot more comfortable with that candidate. One disadvantage, though, to doing it all ourselves is we can't provide the cultural and sort of social programming to the students while they're abroad. I mean, we do communicate with them virtually while they're abroad, and if students are all going to be kind of in the same locale, then we'll share each other's names so they can meet up with each other, possibly share housing to cut costs, but unfortunately we really can't do any real programming with them.
A quick note, a question regarding the WIVRA listserv. Thank you, Bill, who is on the webinar. He mentioned to describe to WIVRA the listserv, email bnolting, BNOLTING, @umich.edu with the subject line subscribe WIVRA L, and Bill will be able to add you to the WIVRA listserv. Thank you, Bill. Fantastic. Another good question here from Georgiana. What insight do you have for a small career services office developing international internships? What do you think, Jennifer?
I feel like I have a lot to say to that. I almost want to just email offline because I don't want to talk forever. I mean, honestly, I would say start small. Try to find out what's already going on, because it's possible that there's an academic department that's already doing something and you don't know, or maybe your study abroad office is doing something and you don't know. So first I would say just take the pulse of your campus. Look at, like I said in the beginning, what your strengths are. So if there's a particular major that you think lends itself best, just start with that first, and then maybe think about partnering with a couple providers.
Yeah, and another thought would certainly be if you're in career services, presumably you have connections with a lot of the local businesses that will take your students for internships or jobs. Engaging them to simply say, hey, we know we place with you locally. Do you have an office abroad? Would you be interested in hosting interns over there? And also engaging alumni relations on your campus as well to say, hey, sure, we have alumni all over the world. If we can get a list of those that are abroad and, within X years, implying that they may be in management positions in companies abroad, to be able to reach out to, that's certainly a good starting point. But yeah, in terms of if there's a credit model that allows students to get credit enough so that they might be able to tap into their resources if they're going abroad, engaging a provider may be able to open up a few more doors as well.
And you could also counsel students on finding opportunities on their own. I mean, like I said before, sometimes companies are more willing to hire one student than to, just put their toe in the water, as opposed to getting entirely in the swimming pool. They don't always want to just say, yeah, we're going to partner with you, for the next, 5 years or whatever. Like, maybe they'll be more open to just hiring one student. So you could even just try to gather resources. There's a website called Going Global. You have to have a subscription institutionally, but that has really great resources for students who are looking for internships abroad. Like I said, some companies even just post positions. So if you have someone who can even work with that student, on what would this look like for you applying for a job in a different cultural setting. There's probably different expectations for your resume, for your cover letter, for interviews. Just working with them to try to get the opportunity on their own, and then from there try to grow the relationship. Once you've had a successful semester, that could be one way to approach it too.
Absolutely. Good one here. How do you convince your institution that international internships are as valuable or more valuable than local internships? That is, of course, the raging debate on a lot of campuses. Obviously, I'm a little biased. I didn't mention in my bio that I'm an alum of the Global Experiences Dublin program, but simply the folks that are in study abroad that are on this webinar know inherently the transformation that can occur by taking a student outside of their comfort zone, immersing them in a foreign culture, and seeing that growth and independence occur. When you combine that with a professional work experience, which is inherently one of the things that will obviously hold the most weight for potential employers down the road, and combine those things into one, at least in our experience over 15 years, and we have about 5,500 alumni, much of those students who have graduated, they've been asked about their intern abroad experience more so than their study abroad experience if they had both. For a lot of people, they've said that it holds more weight on their resume than the first 2 years of their university degree combined. And so it's one of those things that anecdotally we know that it can be a huge professional stepping stone and personal stepping stone for students. Being able to compile the macro statistics to in fact show that those students who have interned abroad are X% more employable than the average college graduate, I know are things that NACE comes out with their particular statistics about employability. Open Doors has a bit as it relates to study abroad. I know WIVRA hopefully in the future we'll be able to compile some statistics about the the nature or employability of those with internships or volunteer abroad specifically. I'm sure those things are in the works.
Yeah, and I mean, I would echo everything you just said. Also, I mean, we as an institution get feedback from the big employers that hire our students, even for jobs. I mean, we always want to be clear when we talk to students that the point is not that we think you're going to go work abroad forever, because the reality is most of them are working in the U.S. And so, we get feedback even from the U.S. employers that they want to be hiring these college graduates who have had these global experiences, who are culturally savvy. So they are requesting, to have students who have those experiences. It's also written into, so we have a strategic plan, and one of the goals within the strategic plan, meaning our institution, not our office, but our institution has the strategic plan. One of the points is about developing global citizens, and actually within that, it specifically says that we will send more students abroad to intern. So it's actually a mandate from our president's office that we will be sending more students. I mean, we are lucky in our campus that we have a lot of support for what we do. I know some people have to do more convincing, and so like Alex said, I think the data is really important, and getting the feedback from the employers, who are hiring your students for full-time jobs, seeing what they're looking for.
Absolutely, and I know that there are a few studies that have come out. I know that the University of Minnesota in particular has done quite a bit of polling of their students who have interned abroad in addition to study abroad, and they have some very good statistics out there. I know that there are a few upcoming presentations at both the NAFSA convention in Denver, and also GIC is the Global Internship Conference. It is taking place in Boston this year. I believe it's mid to late June. That should also have some great presentations with some concrete numbers about the deliverables, the ultimate end results of students who intern abroad specifically. Great, moving on. Martha has a good question about compensation. She said, do you require employers to provide compensation for flight and housing during internships? Also, are these internships paid or unpaid? Quickly, from the third-party provider standpoint, and coming from the standpoint of, we are placing students, yes, in some technical fields, but mainly in some softer areas like history and NGOs and nonprofits abroad. Most of our international internships are unpaid. We encourage the employer to compensate the students in some capacity. That's most often represented by a stipend, a small stipend, or lunch, or a public transportation card. those kinds of things. It is more common in more technical fields, and I'm sure Jennifer can say a little bit more about the average for those larger, maybe multinational employers in engineering.
Oh, sure. So last year, the average compensation for, if you just look at all of our international internships, it was about $1,300 per month US. So one thing we always tell our students is you have to know that you're not going to make as much abroad as you do here. Because for our engineering and computer science students who are used to interning or co-oping here, they can make a, a ridiculous salary. They have the skills that are in demand, and so we have to temper that expectation. We don't require that the employer pay, but we do say, this is going to get you the best candidates. So if you really are serious about this and you want someone who's going to make a significant contribution, then you should be paying them basically the equivalent to what it will cost to live there for that time period. So, we're not asking them to give the students enough that they can, travel every weekend and be saving money, but they should not be going into the red to the extent possible. So compensation can look different with different companies. Sometimes they include the flight. We don't require it. If it's a large company, they may have corporate housing or intern housing, but a lot of times the students are on their own, but we do ask that they at least give the students some advice on where to live. We also tap our alumni, so if we have students who have done that program before, we'll ask them about they can give the student advice for housing, but usually that's not included. But just like Alex said, for our business or liberal arts students, usually the opportunities are unpaid, and unfortunately for us, that is a problem because we can't give them funding. They're not eligible for our scholarships or fine aid, so we don't have the same numbers in those majors going abroad, but that's also not the bulk of our students. We have like 80% engineering and computer science. So it works for us in our model. Yep,
and with some other institutions where they are able to have students go abroad during both summer and semester for an unpaid internship, typically the students have been able to get between 6 credits in the summer to 12 credits, 12 to 15 during the semesters. And so through that, they are able to tap into their existing grants, scholarships, financial aid, and this is more similarly structured to a study abroad program. Instead of sitting in the classroom while they're abroad, they are gaining that hands-on work experience and also gaining the 12 credits. Therefore, instead of paying for room and board on campus during the semester and their regular tuition, those things are almost repurposed for the program cost and the cost of the tuition itself. So for a lot of models like the SUNY in particular, most SUNY students are able to participate in an internship program for a whole semester, and it's almost cost neutral. It costs them about the same to either stay at their home institution or do an internship abroad for 12 to 15 credits. So it is creating those curriculum models, or either you have it or you don't, or you might have to get flexible to be able to find 3 more credits within your curriculum to be able to open these things up for students. That's typically done in conjunction with the third-party provider. We work pretty closely with a lot of our institutions on those things. Quick one from Melissa, and I apologize, Melissa. She was wondering whether we were going to be talking about service learning as well as the internship side of things. Unfortunately, not so much today. The great part about WIVRA is that it does also tackle volunteering and service learning. One of our upcoming webinars in the next month or so is going to most likely tackle service learning a little bit more specifically. Great. Looks like we got a nice meaty 2-part question from Paige for you, Jennifer.
Okay.
So regarding credit for international internships at Georgia Tech, number 1, are the internships you run semester long? And number 2, do students usually receive credit for their domestic co-op placements? As you said, sometimes international internship takes the place of one of those. And have you had pushback from faculty, students, or other stakeholders if not offering in-house internships for credit?
Okay, so our internships can really be at any point in the year. So it could be fall semester, spring semester, summer term, or a combination thereof. So a student can actually go for up to a whole year and still be registered. So it's year-round. No, our model is based off of the domestic co-op model, so it's essentially the same class that the student would register for if they're doing a domestic co-op or internship. It just has a different title. It's international internship or international co-op instead of just regular co-op. So no, we don't really get pushback because it's such a ingrained part of our culture. In fact, somebody did ask about, it was actually a language, modern languages faculty member asked about giving credit for internships abroad, mainly because it would help with the funding and the financial aid aspect of it, but that didn't go anywhere because it's such a ingrained part of our history to do the co-op model. It would just require, I mean, I thought about approaching that subject, but it would require a lot of changes on a very high level, and I don't know if we would even have the support to do that. So for now, yeah, it's hard to explain because it's what we call co-op credit. So it's basically audit. They're still enrolled, but it doesn't go to their degree their credit total for their degree.
All right. So quick question here. Follow up from Melissa, and it looks like we're going pretty long, so we appreciate those that are sticking around. You can leave if we're a little over. Does Georgia Tech and GE consider service learning and internships to be looked at similarly? At least speaking for global experiences, we have a very clear delineation where we are focused on professional internships. Service learning we consider a very different thing. Our focus is helping students gain professional skills, typically within a professional workplace environment. So these are in an office environment or tying back directly into their curriculum versus more service learning. I would put in the same category as volunteerism. Of course, that's kind of a topic for another day. But I know that Georgia Tech, I would imagine, is similar in that coming up with learning objectives, being really specific and focused in terms of having the tasks and functions of the internship being that practical application of the things that are being learned in the students' particular courses and their major.
Yeah, I mean, in some cases, we could register a student who's doing more of a service-oriented experience, but it would have to still be, full-time. It's basically a job, but in, a service setting or in a developing country type of setting. So, we had a student last year who did something in Guatemala where she was working with, she's a liberal arts student, and so she was working with the local community on sort of health education, community engagement, things like that. But just once we saw the details of what she was doing and the fact that it was related to her major and her future career, we were able to register that as an internship. But most of the time, service type roles fall under a different category in our office.
Great. We've got a couple of quick ones here from Diosera Castillo. Can you give us examples of the cost of third-party internships? And then also a follow-up to that is how do you do the background check on international employers? So with third-party internship providers, it will range completely, and it is mainly a result of, it depends simply on what is needed on behalf of the institution. So for global experiences, because we are a very high-touch program, we do about 15 hours average one-on-one time with each student with the professional development before they go and then when they're on the ground to ensure this is as good an experience as possible. We have programs that start if an internship is the only thing that is required, probably starting at $2,100 for the coaching and the facilitation of the internship and the support on the ground. For full semester-based programs, they're on par with your traditional study abroad because they include things like the cost of housing and insurance and social events and excursions and the 24/7 support staff and all of those things. So it can be as much as up to $11,000 or $12,000 for a full program. Obviously, working in conjunction with the institution and figuring out what they need versus what they don't need, how they can incorporate the aspects of an effective program into what they're looking to accomplish to keep the costs down for their students and open up the doors for more students to do these kinds of things. That pretty much is paramount. So the short answer is that it will vary quite a bit, but that is where providing an in-house model certainly has an advantage. Where if you do not have to incur the cost of these kinds of things by getting that outside support, then you're able to save that money and able to facilitate your own internships. But of course, thinking about the hard costs of the folks in your office and the resources and time and attention devoted to those things, versus the cost inherently of outsourcing that, are things that need to be weighed. And then I don't know, any other thoughts on that, Jennifer?
No.
Sounds good. The background checks for international employers. Sounded like Jennifer kind of gave an overview in terms of doing some online stalking and being a starting point in terms of making sure that you can find them on LinkedIn and that they are in fact connected, and there's enough forensic evidence that they are legitimate up online to be able to feel fairly comfortable. I know that in a lot of the more technical fields or in multinationals, typically there can be some fewer red flags. Obviously, when you are talking about other industries like an NGO or a nonprofit, something that's psychology or social services related, obviously ensuring that that's going to be a valid and educational and safe environment for a student is pretty critical. That's where having some actual on-ground site visits makes a lot of sense.
And I don't know if I actually said this, but I talk to everybody. So there's always at least one phone call, but usually many, and email exchanges just to make sure that they understand what we're looking for and to clarify any, points of concern. So I do reject employers, not all the time, but I mean, certainly some things come across where I just think this either isn't what we're looking for, this won't meet our needs, or I just have red flags.
Yeah. Yep. And same for us. If there are red flags, it's better to say no to an employer and to look for a better one than to put a student into a less than ideal situation. Especially for us, we vet employers even more thoroughly than we do the students, because a fantastic employer we know can be relied to provide multiple experiences for a number of students, or semester after semester, to provide a really fantastic opportunity. And then, of course, we're also conscious of one bad experience and one real mess up can jeopardize a relationship with a university or an institution. And of course, that's something that we don't want to skimp on. Great. And then, sorry, Martha, that you stuck around for this. The listserv email address, one more time, it is B as in boy, Nolting, Nolting, at umich.edu, University of Michigan. That is Bill Nolting. He is a past WIVRA chairman and has been pretty critical in a lot of the development of these WIVRA documents that we had at the beginning of the presentation. All right, I think that is almost all we've got. We've got a couple of thank yous. And yes, the webinar has been recorded, so this is all going to be posted up onto YouTube, so you'll be able to send this off to your colleagues who were not able to attend today. Any other questions before we take off? Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. All right, so it looks like no more questions. I think that is it. Thanks again. We will look forward to, when we send an email out to the various listservs with which you most likely came across this presentation. We will also include links to all of the WIVRA resources that we referenced at the beginning, and we'll look forward to answering any further questions that you do have. Both Jennifer and my contact information is on the slide right here. So we'll look forward to seeing if we can answer any questions for you guys. And continuing to expand this fantastic area of international education. Thanks so much.